West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Tonight, the top U.S. General Mark Milley is giving his take on another chapter in the Trump classified documents investigation. This was reporting that CNN broke last week that the former president was recorded in July 2021, indicating that he had a classified Pentagon document pertaining to a potential attack on Iran, and implying that it would counter what his top general, Mark Milley, was saying. Those comments were apparently in response to a New Yorker article saying that Milley had warned Trump against striking Iran, reportedly telling Trump, quote, "You're gonna have a effing war." CNN's Oren Lieberman spoke exclusively with General Mark Milley, who was only willing to say this about that investigation.
The former president suggested in a book by Mark Meadows that it was your desire to attack Iran, and he was saying no. Is that what happened?
Well, it'd be entirely inappropriate, Oren. Thanks for the opportunity to comment on that. It'd be entirely inappropriate for me to comment on an ongoing federal investigation, and I'm not going to do that now. So,
not even to clarify what happened there?
No, I think it's inappropriate. There's an ongoing federal investigation, and I'm not going to comment one way or another on any of the issues concerning that.
Let's get more insight tonight from former Trump National Security Advisor John Bolton. And thank you, Ambassador, for being here. You heard from General Milley there weighing in. We do know from our reporting that he has spoken to investigators in this case. But when it comes to this document that Trump allegedly had on plans to potentially strike Iran, do you know which document Trump could have been holding in his hands during this recording?
Well, I don't think there's any way of knowing, and given Trump's propensity to overstate things, it's entirely possible he was holding in his hand something like the lunch menu from the Bedminster Grill that day, and that he was embellishing on what a document that Mark Milley might have prepared would say. So this goes to a pretty fundamental point. I don't have any doubt there are very sensitive documents involved here, but until you actually see them, I think it's important not to kind of overhype what may be at stake here, particularly with Trump, whose propensity to bluster, there's actually a better word for that I won't use on TV, but his propensity to bluster is unending.
Well, I think there's concern from prosecutors here, though, because they clearly want to know more about this. I mean, they brought the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in to talk about it. And of course, we don't actually know which document Trump was holding at that time, if he was simply referencing this document. But what our reporting did show is that the Justice Department wanted this document, and they sent a subpoena. They made clear to Trump's attorneys, I was told, that they wanted this document specifically that he was talking about on tape. But Trump's attorneys could not locate the document to produce it. So if he was holding that document and they were unable to find it, and there is a document related to Iran out there, how much does that concern you about how it could compromise the U.S. national security?
Well, if it were an actual document that the Pentagon produced as as a war plan, that would be one thing. If it's simply Trump making it up as he goes along, that could explain why they can't find it, because it never existed. I mean, the other explanation is he destroyed it. And that would be a very serious matter, because it would show, I think, clearly a guilty intent that he had a highly classified document. The idea that you can take, though, the real official documents the Pentagon works on and kind of spread them around, even to the president, I would be very surprised at that. They are understandably kept very tightly held, infrequently taken away from the Pentagon, and usually removed from the Situation Room or the Oval Office with great care when the people who brought them over leave.
And I should note that you also have a level of concern here. The Justice Department charged a suspected Iranian operative last year for allegedly plotting to assassinate you. But on this front of when it comes to the relationship that Trump had with General Milley, what were your observations about Trump's views toward Chairman Milley?
Well, when I was at the White House, this was in the period where the successor to General Joe Dunford, who was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs at the beginning of the administration, was going on. And my own personal view was that Mark Milley should be chairman of the Joint Chiefs. It happened that Trump agreed with that and appointed him. And I think at the beginning he was enthusiastic that it was a good choice. And I certainly believed that at the time. I was gone, I think, when a lot of this interesting material happened. But it's obvious that relationship between Milley and Trump soured, as Trump's relationship with so many other people soured.
As we see these investigations ramp up, we're going to wait to see what the special counsel does on this documents investigation. Trump is still the front runner for the Republican nomination for president. You've said you're considering a 2024 run. Have you made a decision on that yet?
No, I haven't. I want to see what happens with some of the other announcements. I would not do this frivolously or merely to criticize Trump's performance in office, although that would be, I think, an extensive job to do. It would be with the serious intent to win. I think it's critical for the Republican Party, absolutely critical, and for the country as well, that Trump not get our nomination. I think in a race against Biden, as unpopular as Biden is, Trump might well win. So I think this is a serious matter that Republicans are going to have to deal with. I wouldn't count on a deus ex machina like an indictment in the classified documents case to save us on this. Knowing Trump, he may well turn it into an asset.
How soon do you think you need to make a decision on on this, since we're seeing how big the field is getting?
Well, frankly, that's another consideration. If there's a small army of people wandering around seeking the nomination, I don't think there would be a case that I would be adding anything. But I think it's still early. I think this is a very strange cycle. And I think, honestly, in the next 90 days, it's a two-man race between Governor DeSantis and Trump. I think, knowing Trump as I do, that he will unload on DeSantis unceasingly. He's already started. And I think Governor DeSantis has got to come back with his case as to why Trump's not qualified to be president. And that's really a marker for everybody else who might get in. You're not going to get the Republican nomination by picking away at the other opponents. You're going to win the nomination by taking Trump on directly and beating him.
Well, they're not really taking Trump on directly. I mean, we saw 8 of the candidates, Trump is the 9th, in Iowa over the weekend, and none of them would really directly say his name when they were on stage. Do you think it's a mistake for candidates like Governor DeSantis to not directly criticize Trump in this race?
100%. This is not an issue about philosophy, because Trump has no philosophy. And it's not really an issue about his personality or his temperament. It's about his competence to be president, which he does not have. And I think unless you make that point effectively to voters and ignore the 800-pound gorilla, it's impossible to make that case. So I think the person who ultimately wins the Republican nomination is the person who beats Trump. And as you say, and I agree, I don't think anybody has stepped up to that role. Maybe Chris Christie will. God bless him if he does. But if he doesn't, somebody needs to. In my case, though, it would be not just to do that, but to win the nomination.
Well, we'll see what you decide ultimately. I know you were listening to the top of the show as we were talking about this new CNN reporting on investigators looking into a pool that was drained at Mar-a-Lago and then flooded a room. that has the computer servers that store the surveillance footage that we know prosecutors have subpoenaed. Of course, still a lot of questions about that, but what was your reaction to hearing that?
Well, I think the prosecutors are right to be suspicious of Trump and his capacity to obstruct justice. This particular episode, frankly, struck me as a little Rube Goldberg-like, but not beyond the realm of the possible. I don't remember the geography or the architecture enough to understand how draining the pool would have flooded this room. But it's, look, you've got to pursue every lead in a case this serious. There's no doubt about it. It may turn out not to represent anything, or it may. We don't know. There's a lot we don't know, and that may be part of it.
It is Tuesday, the 6th of June of 2023, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, a small scant dash, a mere pinch of hot-smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. It always has, and it always will. Yes, it will. Okay, well, they blew up that dam, and I don't know who they are. I'm thinking the Russians, but I don't know. Anyway, that is a terrible thing, because that not only is a danger to the poor civilians that are living there and have been inundated, but also you might call that area the grain belt, for part of the world at least. A very important farming region. And so I gotta say, it's not the Russians that would have benefited by the growing of the wheat. Let's just put it that way. Anyway, so then we got that going for us, and let's call it what it is. A war crime. That's what it is. I mean, it is literally the definition of a war crime. Okay. Speaking of war crimes, John Bolton thinking that he might throw his hat in the ring. Won't everybody? Yeah, he's going to hold back because there's a small army, running for the brass ring. And he knows where he would line up when everybody's running for the brass ring. Yep. But anyway, I think he had some important points to point out. And that had to do with the document that the Justice Department is looking for. Is it just merely an embellishment? Trump waving just a blank piece of paper or a menu? Yeah, Millie gave this to me. I stole this from Millie. Or did he destroy it? Or did he get passed on to a hostile foreign power who was the highest bidder? All of them are bad. But I don't know. Too many coincidences. Trump keeps saying that he's been unfairly treated in all of these investigations and in all of this. And it's true, he has been unfairly treated, because no normal person would ever be treated with the entitlement that this mofo gets. What is it about Donald Trump over every other politician you can think of that can steal top secret stuff, brag about it, threaten judges, their kids, their wives, the mother of the taxi cab driver that drove their daughter to school one day? This guy gets away with it all. What is it about this guy? If I had a little bit of a conspiratorial edge to me, I might think he's getting help. Hostile foreign power help. The type of hostile foreign power that would, take out a big dam and inundate the breadbasket of the world. But I don't have that conspiratorial bent. But the facts are the facts. course, we used to say back in the day, a lot of people get thrown in jail for conspiracy. Yeah, but that's a different conspiratorial bent. Anyway, kind of makes me mad. All of it. The guy gets away with it all. What's the guy's name in L.A. Confidential? The guy that gets away with it all. That's why the protagonist becomes a cop. Mm-hmm. Got to get the guy who gets away with it all. That's Donald Trump. All right. Well, I also heard that Trump's supporters will love him even more if he's indicted for stealing top secret documents. Being part of an espionage circle dominated by Vlad, that they will love him even more. Well, because he's their traitor. That's right. He's committing treason for them. And I'm supposed to pretend that we got to make nice with these people? The kind of people that sit on the Grants Pass or the Josephine County Board of Commissioners. I call them supervisors because I lived in another state for the majority of my life. The one due south of us, by the way. A county commission dominated by MAGA. I'm going to say it. MAGA Nazis. Who think that 4-H is woke. So no county fair this year. Nowhere to show your pig and take it to slaughter. Daddy, I was going to raise this pig and make it really, really, really big and win a blue ribbon and then slaughter it. Now I can't because 4-H is woke. Assholes. All right. Well, John Bolton, there in his clip, I just want to make mention of this, is that he said, I might run. Joe Biden is so unpopular that Trump might win. Yeah. Yeah, Joe's so unpopular, they are absolutely afraid he's going to get voted into another term by Democratic voters who, we look at results. Jobs. Murder rate is down. Oh, yeah, well, that's bad. Murder rate is falling too fast, according to the GOP. Got to prop those numbers up. How else can we slam Joe? All right, well, is this some sort of penance that we're paying because of a sin that we committed? When do we pay off this debt? Because I want out of it. Can't you forgive the debt? Isn't what Christianity all about, forgiving our sins? Come on. Take this evil away. And I don't even like the term evil, but man, like I said, it's starting to piss me off. All right, what do we have in store for you in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy on this fine Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays? One more reminder. We soak the corn because we put corn in the chowder. But first what we do is we soak the corn in its husk for a considerable amount of time in a citrus water bath. And then we roast that corn in its husk. And then we take those kernels off that cob and we put it in the chowder. Yummy. And we get a little bit of Hungarian paprika in there too. Just a smidgen. All right, what's in store for us on this fine Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays? Citing California's increasing wildfire risk and soaring construction costs, State Farm and Allstate have stopped writing new policies in the nation's most populous state. Going to be tough for new home buyers to get a new home when they won't be able to get an insurance policy. Other people can get homes without the insurance. and they're running a risk. But why now? Climate change. But that's a hoax, isn't it? I don't know. Actuaries tell us what is the truth, don't they? Oregon is invested in Fox Corp. What? But they are investigating its board over bogus election fraud claims. Oh, really? And the new College of Florida is without an American history professor after a DeSantis critic was fired by the new DeSantis board. Rufo and his friends. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the European Union's highest court confirmed that Poland has refused to comply with EU rules on judicial independence. This has been going on for a considerable time. And France's beloved Abbey of Mont Saint-Michel celebrates 1,000 years since the laying of its first stone. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, who will be attending Netroots Nation this year. So we'll be looking forward to Kelly's dispatches from Chicago. And thank you, Kelly, for everything that you do. If you out there in radio listening land would now take a gander across the page to the left and down just a little bit, a skosh. How about that? You'll notice our Patreon link, and if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, it does help us pay our bills and all the other costs incurred in running this powerhouse of resistance against dark forces arrayed against not only representative democracy, but I would dare say humanity itself. And we're doing our small part with a little bit of gallows humor because, hey, that's what you do to survive, right? Anyway, all kidding aside, your generosity has allowed us to pay those bills and the other costs incurred, and lets us continue to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended so many, many years ago. 12 at least. 12 years, a dozen. Thank you anyway for your generosity. It really does help us. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, Mastodon, and Spoutable, you can do so at Netroots Radio, and Tom takes care of that and a hell of a lot more. Thanks, Tom. Follow me on those social media platforms as well, Twitter, Mastodon, and Spoutable. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's 10 minutes before showtime, but you can always find the links to the show notes and links by going to my social media feed and finding those links to the Daily Co's diaries I post. So there. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever fine podcasts can be found, mixed in with all the rest of us. There's a few of them, a lot of us. But we're doing what we can. Alrighty. Humble brag that, baby. This first offering in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is by Michael R. Blood from the Associated Press. Two insurance industry giants have pulled back from California's home insurance marketplace, saying that increasing wildfire risk and soaring construction costs have prompted them to stop writing new policies in the nation's most populous state. State Farm announced last week it would stop accepting applications for all business and personal lines of property and casualty insurance, citing inflation, a challenging reinsurance market, and, quote, rapidly growing catastrophe exposure, end quote. The decision did not impact personal auto insurance because people are going to be living in their homes, thankfully. They'll at least be able to cover that. We take seriously our responsibility to manage risk, State Farm said. It is necessary to take these actions now to improve the company's financial strength when all those policies start wanting their money. Allstate, another insurance powerhouse, announced in November it would pause new homeowners, condo, and commercial insurance policies in California to protect current customers. The cost to insure new home customers in California is far higher than the price they would pay for policies due to wildfires, higher costs for repairing homes, and higher reinsurance premiums, Allstate said in a statement. Well, that's getting you in good hands. California's unsettled market aligns with trends across the country in which companies are boosting rates, limiting coverage, or pulling out completely from regions susceptible to wildfires and other natural disasters in the era of climate change. Florida and Louisiana have struggled to keep healthy insurance markets following extensive damage from hurricanes. Premiums are also rising in Colorado amid wildfire threats. And an Oregon effort to map wildfire risk was rejected last year because of fears it would cause premiums to skyrocket. The fears were so pronounced that the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers showed up at county meetings and threatened the wildfire risk assessors with live ammunition. Scientists say climate change has made the West warmer and drier over the last 3 decades and will continue to make weather more extreme and wildfires more frequent and destructive. In recent years, California has experienced the largest and most destructive fires in state history. And some California homeowners already are going without coverage, and a shortage of new policies could make it more difficult to buy a home. A state-run pool that serves as the insurer of last resort for many could face pressure as enrollments surge. Andrew Selsky of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Oregon's Attorney General announced yesterday, Monday, she has begun investigating the board of directors of Fox Corp for breaching its fiduciary duties by allowing Fox News to broadcast false claims about the 2020 presidential election, claims that cost the broadcaster almost $800 million in a lawsuit. Also joining the investigation is Oregon State Treasurer Tobias Reed, who oversees the Oregon Public Employees Retirement Fund, which owns more than 250,000 shares of Fox stock. Both Attorney General Ellen Rosenblum and Reed are Democrats. Really? Rats? Democrats? All right, thank you. Treasurer Reed and I believe that Fox's board of directors breached its fiduciary duties by allowing Fox News to broadcast false claims that Dominion and Smartmatic rigged the 2020 presidential election, Rosenblum said. We hope to hold the board accountable and protect the long-term value of Oregon's investment in Fox Corp. Brian Nick, Chief Communications Officer and Executive Vice President of Fox Corp, declined to comment on Rosenblum's announcement. In April, Fox News agreed to pay Dominion Voting Systems $787.5 million to avert a trial in the voting machine company's lawsuit that would have exposed how the network promoted lies about the 2020 presidential election. Lachlan Murdoch, chair and CEO of Fox Corp, said when the settlement was announced that it avoids, quote, the acrimony of a divisive trial and a multi-year appeal process, a decision clearly in the best interest of the company and its shareholders, end quote. The Oregon Department of Justice said the investigation will explore leading a lawsuit against Fox management on behalf of the company's harmed investors, which include Oregon's public employees. As of May 26, the Oregon Pension Fund owned 168,075 Class A common stock shares and 92,850 Class B shares of Fox stock, said Roy Kaufman, Rosenblum's spokesperson. Brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Eric Wallenberg, a visiting professor at the New College of Florida and a detractor of Ron DeSantis' efforts to take over the state's higher educational system, was unceremoniously removed, leaving the campus without a professor who teaches U.S. history, the Miami New Times reported this week. Though he'd been an outspoken critic of New College's recent anti-woke overhaul, the axing of his teaching position made little sense to Wallenberg from an academic standpoint, reported Naomi Feinstein. The social science department had been supportive of his planned return for another year. He had received positive student evaluations and had just published an American history research paper. In an interview with the Miami New Times, Wallenberg elaborated on why he was surprised by his dismissal. They have no U.S. historians in the department, and they need someone to teach U.S. history. They asked if I would come back, and I said I would definitely be interested, so they said, great. We'll send over the offer letter to the provost's office, and then the head of the social sciences division told me that it was being held up by interim president Robert Corcoran. Yeah, that Robert Corcoran. Wallenberg's status remained in limbo for 6 weeks before he was told that Corcoran, a DeSantis appointee, would not sign off on his offer letter. The New College of Florida, located in Sarasota, has been ground zero of DeSantis' experiment to exert right-wing control over higher education. He appointed a number of far-right activists to oversee the school, including Chris Rufo, a filmmaker who architected the GOP moral panic against critical race theory. The Florida legislature actually rejected one of DeSantis' chosen trustees, Eddie Spear, due to his stated goal of wanting to use his position to proselytize about Jesus to students. Now, Wallenberg's own personal criticism of DeSantis may not be the only factor in his dismissal, the report noted. On April 20th, Wallenberg had Black historian and outspoken DeSantis critic Marvin Dunn, Professor Marvin Dunn, by the way, speak to his class for a lecture about Black history in the state and threats to educational freedom. Wallenberg says the social sciences division head supported Dunn coming to the campus. However, Dunn's presence on campus was bound to ruffle feathers among DeSantis's newly installed college higher-ups. The professor emeritus at Florida International University was one of the plaintiffs who filed a lawsuit in August of 2022 to block DeSantis's so-called Stop Woke Act, which restricts the teaching of systemic racism in public schools, and he has not held back in his opposition to the governor's education agenda. He recently told the New York Times, "We will not allow DeSantis to kill our history. We just won't allow it." And all of this comes at a time when Florida's K-12 school system is also in crisis over DeSantis' back laws prohibiting any expression of queerness and book censorship that pushed one school to strip its library shelves bare. It also comes as DeSantis mounts a campaign for president, trying to sell the country on the agenda he has pushed in Florida. Good luck with that. Okay, let us now go to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
They are very unlike a bird that you typically think of sitting at a bird feeder. It's definitely not that kind of bird.
I'm Flora Lichtman with Scientific American's Science Quickly. Today, episode 3 of our 4-part fascination on really big birds. We're going on a gargantuan goose chase.
I love talking about these big birds because most people, think ostrich and they think that's big. But actually, they were real giants around at one time.
This is Anusia Chinsami-Turan of the University of Cape Town in South Africa. And she's talking about the Dromornithids. That's their scientific name. But in big bird circles, you'll hear them called thunderbirds.
Their name, the thunderbirds, is really quite wonderful because kind of immediately you can understand these really large animals coming.
Thunderbirds lived in Australia, and they had a long run. The earliest members of the group date back 50 million years or so, and one species persisted to about 40,000 years ago. And there was one thunderbird that was more thunderous than the rest.
The largest are the thunderbirds called Dromornis sturtoni, and they are known from the late Miocene, about 8 million years ago.
Here's what to picture.
I think it's like an overgrown ostrich. Just kind of bigger, big beaks. The bones would have been heavier, more bulkier, more robust.
But like a lot bulkier and more robust.
Absolutely. Some of the hugest birds on the planet, or were on the planet.
This is paleontologist and thunderbird expert Trevor Worthy.
They got up to a whopping great 1,300 pounds, which is quite a lot. 10 times a human.
A bird the size of a cow.
Yeah.
They were huge in almost every way.
These things have got no discernible wings. The bit that pokes out of the side of the body is 4 inches. It isn't going to make a dent in the feathers.
They're not flying. Their closest living relatives are ducks and geese, and That's another thing you could picture. Just a gigantic goose trundling across a lush landscape. Australia was greener 8 million years ago, grazing on plants and fruits. And Trevor says the thunderbird's vegetarian diet might partly explain their size.
If you can get big, you can have a big gut, and then you can eat a lot of rubbish. So if you can ingest a lot of low-quality food, then that is one way of living in an environment.
Their big body probably helped them in other ways, too. Here's Anusia again.
Their body size probably evolves in the context of what else was around at the time. So in Australia, there were also these thylacines. These are these marsupial lions. And I think big body size would have enabled them to escape predation.
They're just too big to eat.
Yeah, or otherwise it's too much of trouble to deal with them. You know, you rather go after something that's smaller, that's not going to harm you. Because I think, if we know ostriches certainly are not predators, but an ostrich can do pretty serious damage to any animal that attacks it, just by kicking.
I mean, and if they're related to geese, I mean, we all know how terrifying geese can be.
Yes. I had a friend earlier this year that was attacked by a goose. I mean, you're not going to believe this, but literally she had to be hospitalized because this goose attacked her out of nowhere.
Just imagine if that goose was 1,300 pounds.
Exactly.
But how did thunderbirds grow so big? That's something Anusia wanted to understand. And to drill down on that question, she took a very thin section of a thunderbird bone and looked at it under the microscope.
And this is fascinating because it tells us about the way in which the bone was deposited. So it tells us about the rates of growth.
Bones have rings that correspond to growth, like tree rings.
Where you have a wide band, that is growth during the favorable season. And then you have a growth line that indicates growth stopped for a period of time. And then afterwards it resumed. So just like tree rings, you can count the number of rings and you can work out the age of the animal, and you can work out how long it took for an animal to grow to an adult body size.
This bone ring method is a feather in Anusia's cap. She developed it when she was just a fledgling PhD student working on dinosaurs. And when she applied this method to this giant thunderbird, she found
these birds lived life in a slow lane. We can find growth cycles in the bones that suggest that they took about 15 years to reach an adult body size. And this is really a long time compared to modern birds that grow up very quickly.
And it took them years to have babies too, the data suggest. And Anusia and Trevor say that gives us some insight into why these birds don't exist today. If life is easy, if there's enough food and not a lot of pressure from predators, you can take your time to grow up and have babies. But this can be a riskier strategy when life is tough. And life did get tough for thunderbirds. After 8 million years ago, Australia became more arid, and that's when the giant thunderbird disappears. Humans arrived in Australia around 50,000 years ago, and soon after, you don't find any species of thunderbirds at all.
Having the strategy of life in the slow lane didn't facilitate being able to deal with something new in the environment, which was taking out numbers of their young.
This theory is backed up by another bird tale. Consider the emu, a different big bird that lived alongside the thunderbirds.
An emu, in contrast, it'll grow to full body size in 14 months and is breeding shortly after that.
And while the thunderbirds went extinct, the emu survives.
It survives because its growth rate is so much faster. So it is able to reach an adult size very quickly, it reproduces very quickly, and it's able to recoup its numbers very quickly.
And that's something to think about, because many of the birds that are feeders, flapping around our cities, pooping on our cars, they live life in the fast lane. They grow up quickly and have babies early. And in an uncertain world filled with two-legged jerks who make life hard for other animals, this strategy has advantages.
So I think that when you see a pigeon or a robin, one should appreciate that they are the end products of long evolutionary history, that there were many other forms that came before them. And I think the giant birds that evolved, they also are part of this evolutionary history of all modern birds that we see today.
On the next Science Quickly, when a big bird becomes an axe murderer.
Terror birds do not follow the general rules of birds. They use the beak as an axe to kill prey.
That's terrifying.
Well, that's why they are terror birds.
That's next time. You've just listened to part 3 in a 4-part Science Quickly fascination on the real big birds. Science Quickly is produced by Jeff Del Vicio, Tulika Bose, and Kelso Harper. Our theme music was produced by Dominic Smith. Don't forget to subscribe to Science Quickly wherever you get your podcasts. Head over to scientificamerican.com for in-depth science news. For Science Quickly, I'm Flora Lichtman.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. It doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
Danger, danger, go back, go back. Books ahead.
Listen up. This matters. I'm Louis Black, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
Escambia County, Florida, has been sued for banning books in its school libraries. Among the books, Tango Makes Three, the award-winning children's book, a true story about a penguin family in the Central Park Zoo with 2 fathers, a situation apparently not a biggie in the penguin world. So far, the school committee has removed 10 books, including Tango, contrary to the recommendation of the expert review committee, which said keep the books on the shelves. But the school committee didn't, and in fact, changed the policy about what happens to books that have been approved that are being challenged. A challenge book used to stay put during the review process. Now, books being challenged are indefinitely quarantined in a restricted area in the school library that children cannot enter without prior parental permission, an obvious disincentive that raises a kind of penguin and the egg problem. How can kids check out a book or ask for parental permission if they can't hold it in their hands and look at it? As Suzanne Nossel, the CEO of PEN America, one of the plaintiffs in the lawsuit, said, this school district offers a vivid and disturbing example of what's happening across the country with politically motivated, ideologically driven, viewpoint-based bans on books.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the American Civil Liberties Union because freedom can't defend itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1988. That was the day that between 2 and 3 million black workers went on strike in South Africa. The Congress of South African Trade Unions had called for 3 days of national peaceful protests. For 2 years, the government had declared a state of emergency. The emergency was used as an excuse to raid black trade unionists' office and jail union leaders. In early 1988, new legislation was proposed to weaken strikes and sympathy strikes and even hold unions financially liable for a company's earnings losses during work stoppages. The government also was cracking down against those who dared to speak out against the repressive apartheid system. The black trade unionists planned the Stay Away, as the action was called, to protest these tactics of their government. Workers ground work to a halt in many of the nation's major cities. Nearly empty trains arrived in the nation's largest city, Johannesburg. It is estimated that nearly 2/3 of black workers in these cities participated in the action. One group that did not participate were miners. Millions of miners had gone out on strike less than a year before. To drum up support for the stay-away action, the black trade unionists placed newspaper advertisements reading, "To support our struggle for democracy and the right to speak, meet, and organize for a democratic, non-racial future." The police cracked down on newspaper coverage of the general strike within the country. But despite this repression, the absence of millions of workers could not be missed. The action was part of labor's crucial role in the struggle to dismantle the apartheid system. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 60 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs in the mid-90s, maybe even warmer than that. Mainly sunny to start, then a few afternoon clouds and a stray shower or thunderstorm is possible with winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Then mostly cloudy tonight with scattered thunderstorms mainly during the evening hours, lows near 60. A little warm for overnight lows, I'll tell you. Winds will be out of the west at 5 to 10 miles per hour, and then mostly cloudy tomorrow with a stray shower or thunderstorm possible. And highs will be in the mid-80s, and it looks like we have a fair chance of rain for tonight and tomorrow. So we'll look forward to that. Any amount of minerals in a liquid form that fall from the sky is considered good around here. Grass pollen is rated very high here in Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is good at 23 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is very high at level 9. So you better cover up. Get yourself in some shade. Make some shade. Yes. Barometric pressure is falling at 29.82 inches. Visibility is at 8 miles, and relative humidity is at 70%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 61 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 81 degrees and sunny. Rome is 79 and partly cloudy. Kyiv is 78 and mostly cloudy. Kabul is 70 degrees and clear. Hong Kong is 81 with light rain showers. Tokyo is 65 with rain. Sydney, Australia is 51 degrees and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 58 degrees with rain showers, and New York is 71 degrees Fahrenheit and fair. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Rafe Kasser of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. The European Union stepped up its rule of law fight with member state Poland yesterday, Monday, when the bloc's highest court confirmed that Warsaw had refused to comply with EU rules on judicial independence, for which it has already lost more than 500 million euros, which is about 535 million US in fines. The Court of Justice of the EU ruled that Poland's 2019 justice reform infringed EU law after the European Commission, the bloc's executive branch, said that the Polish Supreme Court lacked the necessary independence and impartiality. By today's judgment, the court upholds the Commission's action, a court statement said. It was the latest in a streak of setbacks for the nationalist conservative ruling party in Poland, with many Poles furious at what they consider a dramatic erosion of democracy in the country. That sentiment boiled over into a massive anti-government protest in Warsaw on Sunday, as reported here yesterday, Monday, which was probably the largest demonstration in Poland's post-communist era, with an election coming up in the autumn. Opposition leader Donald Tusk, who had called for the march, estimated that over 500,000 Poles turned out. Bad news for the government, declared the conservative Do Regi news portal after the EU court ruling. The broadcaster TVP, which acts as a propaganda arm of the ruling party, said the EU court had overstepped its powers and attacked Poland again. The court exceeds its powers. The court decision was, however, welcomed by lawyers and other legal experts who hope it might restore independence to the judiciary.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Associated Press staff bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. France's beloved abbey at Mont Saint-Michel has reached a ripe old age. It's been 1,000 years since the laying of its first stone. The millennial of the UNESCO World Heritage Site and key Normandy tourism magnet is being celebrated until November with exhibits, dance shows, and concerts, and now a presidential visit. French President Emmanuel Macron went there yesterday, Monday, and delivered a speech in which he called on the French to push themselves further in global and existential challenges like that of climate change. He drew a comparison with the abbey that has stood strong over time and embodies the French spirit of resilience and resistance. It was veiled rhetoric, coming one day before another protest against his contested pension reform law that has been passed. Ever since former President Mitterrand in 1983, France's leaders have flocked to the symbolically important site to send out political messages. In 2007, former President Sarkozy even launched his presidential campaign there. Macron's presidential advisors have said that his visit, or of his visit, that the walls of the eternity of the Mount seem to carry the emotions of resistance and resilience of the D-Day landings that are being commemorated this week in the same region. Macron also visited a new exhibit tracing the Romanesque Abbey's history via 30 objects and pieces, including a restored statue of Saint-Michel. Legend has it that the Archangel Michael appeared in 708 duly instructing the bishop of nearby Avranches to build him a church on the rocky outcrop. The exhibit, 2 years in the making, opened last month. It covers the complex process of building what is considered an architectural jewel on a rocky island linked to the mainland only by a narrow causeway at high tide. And I've been one of the many tourists that flock, but I don't call myself a tourist. I've always been an adventurer. Indeed. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts. And let me just break in real quick and say, I'm sorry, I don't know what happened, but we got kicked off of the internet here briefly, and we had some backup files that were able to play in the interim. But you can catch all of the show by podcast, so check that out, and I'll have that up sometime today, hopefully before noonish our time. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, by the way, for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. And do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, l'âge tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, l'âge tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.